Thank you, Pelos Heights. This slide is only funny when I start talking, and then people realize I have a really thick accent. I tend to do this a little bit differently. I'm not gonna talk about just the work that's in the gallery. I always tell myself that that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna concentrate in like the new work, and I never can't do it. It always seems to me that the work that I'm doing has something to do with where I am in my life at that moment, and what's happening in my life, and it's all connected. So I gotta start from the beginning. It's not gonna go any farther than 45 minutes. It'll be 45 minutes to the dot, I assure you. So don't start getting nervous. The accent comes from Venezuela. And I'd like to show you where exactly Venezuela is for those of you that failed geography. It's only two and a half hours by airplane to Miami, so it's not that far. And I'm specifically from a city called Maracaibo, and we have highways and cars. We got one of these things too. And we actually have the longest bridge made out of concrete in the world. That's true, and it's very, very scary. It shakes every time you go through. And I just like this picture because we're very colorful people, so we put color in freaking everything. Like everything has color. And this is me when I was a kid, just because it's an awesome picture, so I had to show it. After graduation, after I graduated from high school, I went to architecture school in Venezuela from 1995 to 1997. I also failed math 3 times during those years, and that's why I'm not an architect. I liked it. I wanted to be an artist from the get-go, but usually like your parents want you to make some money, so they eventually convinced me that I should, be an architect or something like that, and I really liked it. But I seriously took Math 101 3 times, and I bribed the guy at the end, and he still wouldn't take the money. So I left. Art schools in Venezuela are not very good at all. So, I talked to my parents, and they're like, well, if you're going to starve, let's do it with dignity. I was very lucky that they caught a picture of me leaving. So anyway. All right, so I got to the United States. I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff. I got into SAIC, the School of Art Institute of Chicago, for undergrad, and it's a lot of pressure, right? They're a school that kind of wants you to not just know how to draw and paint, but actually have a concept. So this is where like the blank canvas problem starts. What do I paint about? What do I draw about? And I decided, well, I'm from Venezuela. My father is from Spain, and I was raised, in a pretty Spanish way, if you will. Like he was born in Spain, he came with his immediate family. So he married a Venezuelan, so it was like a half and half kind of house. But he was a pretty kind of dominant type of personality. So there was a lot of like Spanish music, Spanish foods. So I would consider myself half Spanish, half Venezuelan by the time I came here. And now I was in a complete different culture, and I was very lost. It was a hard transition. So I'm like, well, that's what's happening in my life right now. That's what I'm going to talk about. So this is the first piece that I made of that series, and it's 5 feet by 5 feet more or less. The top part, this part right here, the flag is acrylic on canvas, and then the bottom part is like water mixed media on paper. And what I did is I kind of designed my own flag. It's a combination of the Spanish flag, which is this, the Venezuelan flag, which is yellow, blue, and red with 7 stars, and then the American flag, which you all know. And the bottom part was kind of like my desire to draw, right? Making a flag like that is pretty boring. So I just kind of wanted to like bring some abstraction into it, and I continue with that abstraction in other paintings. This is a 6 feet by 4.5 feet. Again, water-based media on paper. And I started kind of using still the abstraction that I was working with, but some more maybe icons from different cultures, whether they were political or popular. So you see Elvis here, or like the stars. This is a little collage of a bullfighter, which is kind of it's a symbol from Spain. Here's a different one. And I was enjoying making them a lot, but the truth is that they weren't conveying the idea that I wanted to convey. And the idea that I wanted to convey was that I was in a place where there was a mixture of things. I wasn't from Venezuela really, because I was, raised by a Spaniard, and I wasn't an American really, even though I was living here. And that's what I wanted to convey. And they were conveying other things. They were talking about abstraction. And I kind of made a decision, and I'm like, I gotta go a little bit more conceptual, a little bit more direct. So I left painting and drawing for a little bit. I kept coming back to it, but I think these were the pieces that were more successful out of that body of work. This is a pillow that I made with the flag that I had designed. I wanted to do something that was mass-produced. This is one of the main reasons why I like to start from the beginning, because I'm working with pillows again. So like things just kind of like come back. They just never leave somehow, right? I wanted something that was like domestic, something that reminded me of home. And this is the home that I was in at that moment. Again, Venezuela, United States, and Spain. I also wanted it to be kind of close to the body, right? Pillows are known to kind of absorb worries, they say. They absorb worries. Mine must be like packed, because it's not absorbing any worries anymore. There's a lot of like citizenship issues when you are an international student, like, a lot of paperwork that you have to fill up, and somehow I just wanted the pillow to kind of take care of that. I started working with text. This is a piece that has 9 words. The first 3 words, idioma, recuerdo, and ciudad, are words in Spanish. The last 3 words, culture, space, and city, are in English. And the words in the middle, idea, vision, and popular, are also idea, visión, and popular. They're written exactly the same way in English and Spanish. They have exactly the same meaning. They're just a different pronunciation. So depending on where you're from or what language you speak, you would say, well, there's 6 words in Spanish and 3 in English, or 3 words in Spanish and 6 in English. So again, those 3 words in the middle were the words that would integrate the 2 cultures. I made another one which was integrate young. And you would fill up that blank. In Spanish, is written with a C, integración, and in English is written with a T. So depending on where you're from, you can fill up the blank. So I'm here. I'm like I'm right here, right in the empty space. I wanted to show you a little bit where I would get some of my inspiration for some of the work that came after that. This is 1900 architecture from my city. My city is a very, very hot city. It's 100 degrees in the entire year. So as you can see, like houses were very, very high. So it would keep the hot air up high. But the main point here is that they are crazy, crazy colorful. There's only like maybe 2 blocks left of these, but they're just insane. And everything that's colloquial in my city is insane when it comes to color. Buses are not owned by like the CTA or PACE. They're owned by the bus driver, which is terrible because it doesn't work, and it's great because they paint them however they want, so it's awesome. And I also like this picture because there's a donkey in it. But like, look at this bus. Like, it's just total craziness. I love it. There's a lot of sunglasses in buses because it's very sunny. So, yeah. And everything that's again that from that time is this is a cathedral that's like electric blue, right? So I did go to architecture school for a year and a half. So I decided to put some of the knowledge into practice, and I made my own replica of that type of architecture. And then I covered it with mostly magnets, which is a very American thing. Like when I grew up, we didn't put magnets in our fridges. Now in our house, you can barely see the fridge. So I really wanted to kind of like cover this house with icons that were both from Venezuela and United States. So you see Elvis here, Miller Lite, the Statue of Liberty. But you also, you have some like beans and some things that are like a little bit more Venezuelan. And here I am. And so this is my house. I'm coming out of a window over here. And again, there's that TV over here in the back. This is Simon Diaz, which is kind of a what do you got free type of guy, but from Venezuela, right? So it's like popular music from Venezuela. I also did another one that was covered with words that were written exactly the same way in English and Spanish. Exactly, there is no difference. The only difference is the pronunciation. So again, like you don't know if that's a house that's filled with words in English or Spanish. And then my final and last work of that project was a bunch of bumper stickers that I actually had made professionally, so I had 400 of them. And I'll just kind of explain just a couple of them. Well, the first one is just English written in Spanish and Spanish written in English. This one says, honk the horn if you do not understand what my bumper sticker says. So you really never get to honk the horn, because if you do understand it, then you don't. Yeah, it's deep. This one says, I love United States, written phonetically. So not in Spanish, but just the way it sounds in Spanish, which is the way that we write. And I had this one, honk the horn in Spanish, in my car, and I had to take it off because people keep honking the horn, and I'd be in traffic, and I'd be like, what do you want me to do? And they'd be like, I'm from Spain. I'm like, oh, great. So I took it off. Anyway, so this was my undergrad, little bits of my undergrad. And then I had a question to answer. First of all, I wanted to go to grad school for a couple of different reasons. Number one, if I didn't, I had to go back. I had a few months that I could stay, and then you had to go back. And I didn't want to go back. And number two, because I was kind of in a role, and I want to just keep going, right? So the question was, should I stay or should I go? Meaning in Chicago. Should I stay in Chicago or should I go someplace else? And the answer was yes. I should stay or I should go. I thought about the pros and cons of leaving. There was a part of me that really wanted to go to Yale because it's Yale, it's just awesome. Like it sounds like it would be kind of cool to have a sweater that says Yale. But I kind of I don't know. They are very into theory, and I'm not a very theoretical person. I'm more into like making. And also, Yale is in New Haven, Connecticut, which is basically like a step up of Gary, Indiana. So I'm like, I don't want to live there, So I stayed. I decided to stay. I decided to stay in SAIC. I liked Chicago. I had already moved once, and it was hard for me to move. Latin Americans we don't like to move. We like to stay. So I went to grad school in SAIC as well. But I had a couple of rules that I had made for myself. I mean, if I was going to stay in the same city, in the same school, I was going to start from scratch. I was going to stop doing everything I was doing, and I was going to start from zero. And I wasn't going to take any teachers that I had already taken, which I only broke that rule once for one teacher, and that's it. And I always say inspiration is an active process. The way that it works is, I think actually I saw some studios here for the advanced painting students. The way that it works is that you get a studio. You can sleep in the studio if you want. You can do whatever you want. And you make work, and you have 2 advisors per semester. You sign up with these people, which are supposed to be very smart. and they come to you once every 2 weeks and talk to you for an hour. And that's pretty much it. You take a couple art history classes, and there's some bigger critiques and stuff like that. But it's a lot of pressure when the teacher comes into your studio and you got nothing. It's horrible, right? It's only 2 years. So I was coming from a very conceptual body of work, and I couldn't come up with an idea. So I'm just gonna start painting and going back to like process. And that's how my inspiration is gonna come up. It's gonna come up by working. So these are smaller paintings on canvas, on wood, actually, a wood panel. And what I would do is I would kind of paint these guts, if you will, just because it was a repetitive motion. And then I would sand it down, and I would paint them again. Like, I just needed to be busy, right? So then these things would come up, which I kind of liked. They were a little dark in a way. They're like gods, and I don't know, which kind of reflected a little bit how I was feeling at the moment. I was like really pressured and nervous about this whole grad school thing. I continued to experiment with other materials. I did some of these paintings on steel, and then the steel would rust. And then I realized that if I had 2 big sheets of steel and I would put a piece of paper that was really, really wet, the rust would actually transfer into the paper. So this is like a 4 feet by, 3.5 feet sheet of paper that has a print from the rust. And actually the paper was in between these 2 sheets of steel, right? So I would call this my oven. And I would just come to the studio and put a bunch of pieces of paper full of water, and then 2 days later I had a print, and I would do something with it. And then one day I opened the oven, and I'm like, I kind of really like how that looks, Like I like how it's on the floor and it's on the wall. So then I painted this rectangle, the same color of the floor, and then I discovered installation art. So I did another one, also on steel, where like this is a 4x4 piece, 2x2 piece, and this is a 4x4 piece. So the wall is actually kind of coming into the piece over here. And that was like at the very end of the first semester, where I'm like, eureka, I like what's happening here, right? This is like, it demands the room, I like it. As soon as the semester ended, I went to Oxbow, which is a summer camp, summer school. It's now open year-round, but it's run by the School of Evera Institute of Chicago, and it's kind of like a residency, if you will. And I started doing a lot of these kind of installations about painting in the woods, and that's how I would call them. I say like these were installations that dealt with space and color and shape. So they were still very much about formal issues, right? This was a few months later when Oxbow was actually closed. This was in the fall one. I was dating my wife at the time, and her and I went to Oxbow, and I came with 20 yards of white felt, and I just kind of arranged this thing, and I took a bunch of photographs, and the installation was up for like 2 hours. This is what came out of it, right? And I was trying to make a painting, if you will, but by using materials and then by photographing it. So it leaves as a photograph, obviously. And then each composition would create a different piece, if you will. Going back to the studio after that, like I knew what I was going to be doing, which was installation. And my installations were going to be about nothing. They were going to be about painting. They were going to be about color and shape and that sensation, that feeling that you get when you actually enter this thing, right? That was important to me. So I went back to the color from those 1900 houses in Venezuela. This was my studio at the time. Some of the elements in the studio are painted, most of them are painted on the wall, and some of them are actually painted on canvas. So you kind of didn't know. Sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't know what was what. This is actually my locker, which I eventually had to like repaint. I've graduated from grad school, and this was my first show as a professional artist, quote unquote. This was the summer show in Gallery 312, which was an amazing space, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful space. that was in the West Loop that closed like a year after or something like that. It was too bad. But I basically got a hallway, and I got the keys of the gallery, and the guy told me, don't mess with the floors. You got 9 days. So it was wonderful. It was one of the best experiences I've had putting up a show, because it was 9 days, do whatever you want, bye-bye, I don't want to see you, right? So a lot of these things were actual paintings that were stretched. Like this painting is a paint that I brought from home. This is obviously something that I built for the space, and a lot of the other stuff is actually painted on the walls, so they're murals. Since I couldn't mess with the floor, I decided to bring since I couldn't mess with the floor, I decided to bring the floor up to the wall, so I found this like linoleum wood floor that was the same. And I also put little pieces of contact paper with color on the floor, so they were like a sticker that I could take off. And it was really interesting to kind of like enter this thing. And my whole idea was that you would be entering a painting. That was all orange tape. That was it was a bitch. I'm sorry, I gotta say, it was horrible. And this is how it kind of looked with like some people in it. Soon after, I realized that galleries didn't like it when you painted on their walls a lot, you know. This gallery was special, so I kept like proposing shows, and they're like, yeah, we don't want you to do that. So then I decided to start building a bunch of paintings that would serve as Legos, if you will, you know, like pieces to build an installation. So these are all 6 feet by 3 feet stretch canvases. And again, this is very similar to the gods that I was painting. They're about nothing. They're just very repetitive, very mechanical. They're about color, and that's it. You know, like I didn't really care about what they were about. This is probably one of my favorite pieces of all times, still today, which is a stack of paintings. Actually, the title is Stack of Paintings. And I just love this piece. I'm sorry, I love it. They're all paintings. They're all each and every one of them is a painting. They're all 6 by 3, and it changes every time you put a new painting on top. I love that about it, and I love the fact that I made a sculpture out of actual paintings. But you know, it's disappeared. I sold a few of them. I repainted over some other ones, and it wouldn't be practical in my house. I got 2 kids. It would be not good. But this was my first exercise with these Lego pieces, right? This was in Klein Artworks in Chicago, which was also in the West Loop, which also closed. So I'm starting to think like you guys may be closing very soon. Like, may want to be careful. And again, by this time, I was really getting into more domestic things. This is actually the aerial view of my kitchen countertop. So slowly, like this domestic idea starts to like, you know, get in it. You know, this is kind of how big it was. It's a friend of mine there. So that was 2003, and then this happened. Boom. I got married to that person right there. And then we got a house, which doesn't look anything like this at all, right? Doesn't look anything like it. And it became my biggest ongoing installation. I've been working in the house for 10 years, and I continue to work on it, and I really treat it like it's an installation, right? So these are some photographs of basically 2 minutes after we signed the contract. We literally, I remember I was wearing a coat, and we literally went there. I took my coat off, and we got rid of a carpet. Like immediately, right? We started working on that house. You know, the kitchen had this awful tile, so I'm like, let's get rid of this thing. And the cabinets were like white Formica, and I'm like, let's get rid of it. And you know, like it was a, you know, kind of warm after kind of warm, right? But whatever, you know, like it was mine, so I could do whatever I wanted to it. And that's how like a lot of what I do today, like that's where it started, you know, like the fact that now I have this big room that I can keep changing and changing and changing. Um, where do I get the money? I had just graduated, you know, it was like 1 year after my master's. Nobody's giving me a teaching job, right? Which is basically like all I could do to make money at that point. I wasn't gonna work for McDonald's or anything. So a friend of mine and I were in the same place. We were both married. We both had just graduated, and we just started doing murals. We started a mural business called Artists at Work, and this was our bread and butter. We would do murals for kids. We did faux finishing. We did drywalling. We, fix a toilet once. Like people would just ask us, do you know how to do this? And we're like, sure. Yeah, and they will just like figure out how to do it. It was a lot of work. It was good money, good easy money, especially back then when the economy was better. People that have money, they just don't want to do anything. So they'll just pay you to do whatever. But what I remember the most about this time of my life was the people. People are crazy. People are nuts. So this was a mural for a 9-month-old little baby, and this is a barracuda, you guys. Barracuda with teeth, and the crib was gonna be right here under the big ass turtle right here, right? And it was like the father sent us faxed us, the pictures of the fish that he wanted. It was very important that those fish were there. And I'm like, whatever, And then the kid would look up and would see like sharks, yeah, I know. All right, this was our biggest job that we ever got. I remember how happy we were. This was a mural in a restaurant that was called Nest Cafe in Bartlett, Illinois. The only good thing that ever came out of Bartlett, Illinois is Nate Matthews, who's this guy here. It's just basically 9 miles of nothingness. I heard that things have changed a little bit now. I'm sorry if you're from Bartlett. But anyway, this was a restaurant that was supposed to be like a Italian villa of some sort, and then they hired us to do 1,100 square feet of sky, 28 feet high, and I'm very afraid of heights. So this is how it kind of ended up being. It looked really nice, and the food was awful. It was terrible. Like TGI Fridays was like a 5-star restaurant next to this. All right. It closed. It did close. But when we were there, we finished a mural, and we're like, let's go have a beer and celebrate, because it was a lot of work. And we drove 9 miles, and we could not find a restaurant that served alcohol until we found this other restaurant, which was owned by the same people, right? So I understand things have changed, but like I didn't want to go back there ever again. I forgot to tell you guys, up to this point, I'm making zero art. Zero. I signed the contract for the house, and I stopped making art 100%. I was just married and making murals and making money in order to pay, for the new kitchen and the new floor and the new blah, 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 right? So for a good 5 years, I didn't make any art. I was a good 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, something like that, yeah. And actually, the way that I got back in the studio, I'm not showing you guys this, but the way that I got back in the studio was making oil paintings of my power tools. So it was like, I gotta get back somehow. And then one thing that I did is that by this time I'm already teaching. I had stopped the mural business. I was working for Northeastern and College of DuPage, which is, I guess, not that far from here. And I took a free class in Northeastern, a pre-making class. As a teacher, you get a free class. So I started taking classes it was funny because I would teach my students, and then like half of my class would go into the pre-making class with me as a student, so it was weird. And I encountered the blank canvas again. What do I do? And I'm like, well, I've been working in my house for 4 years. I'll just make work about my house. And pre-making was great for me at that moment because it's a slow process. It's very slow. And it allows you to think, right? So we had just hired these people to remodel a little bit of a house. The front porch, we wanted the front porch to be open, and I couldn't do it. So I started making, this is an etching of, my front porch board is doubled. This is a drawing. This is 30 inches by 22 inches pencil drawing. Again, of the front porch, but I would only do like parts of it. And I really didn't understand why. And I am one of those people that is very intuitive about what I'm doing, and it's really later that I understand why I'm doing it. We didn't have a kid just yet, but I think he was like soon to be born. Things are gonna change. You know that you're gonna stay even more in the house than before. Just home becomes something else. It just becomes like, up to now it's been like my space, and then I get married, and then I have to share this space with somebody else. That's between you and I was a total stranger. Like we had known each other for 5 years, but she didn't even speak Spanish, right? Like it was just a little Spanish. It's like you get married with somebody you don't know, right? Somewhat, coming from a different country, a different home, and I think after I kept doing these things that were double, right? I think I realized that one of the reasons why I was doing it was because we were two completely different individuals living in one home, but that were coming from two different homes. We have after the rehab, we made two little walk-in closets that are just like that. This is obviously two front porches, but so my walk-in closet is little, and then her walk-in closet is little, and then there's this space in between, and the two doors face each other, and they are exactly the same, but completely different. Mine is full of shirts and crap, and hers is all like pretty, and it's got all these little like I can't say that word. Memorabilia. Little things that remind her of like home, and like where she comes from, and like her mom and her grandmother's pictures and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's so interesting that like it's the same structure, but it's so different, right? So slowly that started kind of informing why I was making these drawings and why they were always about the front porch. I also realized that the front porch is a limbo space. You are outside your house, but you are inside your house. And I realized that little space in between the two closets was kind of a limbo space. So slowly I started becoming interested in limbo spaces, which we can get back to in a little bit. At the same time, though, I'm doing other things. I'm starting to get pretty busy. I'm still very interested in installations, and I've always been very interested in collaboration, which hadn't happened yet up to that point. This was an installation that I did in Benedictine University in 2010, in Lisle, Illinois. And they invited me to do a show in their gallery, and their gallery is this, like the walls around the offices, that's their gallery. And I'm like, this is what I'm doing. Like I'm not gonna put like super pristine, white, quiet drawings in between this complete mess. So I'm like, no, thanks. But I would be very interested in doing something right here in that limbo space, right? Like in that space is nothing. And they're like, well, it's a summer show. There's not gonna be any classes. So you can do whatever you want. I'm like, great, bye, And this is what I encountered. I remember getting there and being like, wow, what did I get myself into? Like, what am I gonna do with this thing? And then I realized that it was a beautiful building, and it was just destroyed with all these stupid like banners. So I cleaned up the space completely. I got rid of everything, including an American flag, which was an ordeal to fold. And I had this. I had made these banners that were black and white. They were completely blank, and people thought I was crazy. And then I just made this installation that was just very formal. It was just black and white, but it demanded that you would look at what was around the banners. It demanded that when you were like in the first floor, you would look up, and you realize, wow, have you seen that ceiling? That ceiling is awesome, right? I'd never seen that thing because of all the stupid banners before. Um, and that was that. It was very simple. I just wanted to clean up the space and like make people actually like pay attention. I was really happy with it. And then my first collaboration started with Chicago-based artist Mara Baker. She is a teacher in College DuPage. And I was teaching in College DuPage, and her way of making art was very, very different than mine. She's very messy, and I'm very clean. And I'm like, why don't we do this thing? And what I did is I would just give her a monotype, 30 by 22, and she would take it home and she would manipulate it. So you can't tell which one's me and which one's her, right? Like my stuff was about space and, again, like these windows, you didn't know if you were inside or outside. And then her stuff is a collage stuff that's all like, drippy and, dark. Sometimes she would give me a piece and I would manipulate it, but it was really interesting. We call it trading paper. I would give her a monotype. She would give me a collage. I would cut it up. The rules were there were no rules. If I didn't like something, I would cut it up. I would do something with it. And only one time, these are large. These are like 58 by 42. These are pretty large. Only one time we actually had to give the drawing back to the first person. Like I gave it to her, and she gave it back to me because she couldn't solve it, and that was the worst drawing we ever did. So it was always like one pass. And then we realized that the drawings were really nice, but they looked like blueprints. So we started to propose installation pieces with the drawings. Like we would say, like, we would like to do an installation piece, and they'd be like, well, what are you thinking? And we were like, in this, right? And they're like, fancy, let's do it. So we got 3 installation shows. The biggest one was in Kansas City, in this gallery called Caran Cabezas Contemporary. And it was big. It was a big room, and we were there for a whole week. And it was based on our drawings, but it was also based on the architecture around. Like the ceilings were beautiful, so we wanted to kind of do what I did in Benedictine a little bit and have people look around the space as well. It was quite an endeavor. It was a good 45 hours of work. This is how it looked with people, and we also showed all 14 pieces that we made in that show. It was a lot of fun. I've also collaborated with other artists that do more like performative art work. This is Alberto Aguilar, which actually was part of a summer show here in Seville. Did I say it right? Seville. And this was a lot of fun. I'm not gonna do 45 minutes. All right, I'll try. This was a lot of fun. This was a dinner that we put together, and it was called the middle dinner, and it was curated by Jessica Cochran, and she invited certain people, and it was 30 people, and everything we did was about the middle, right? So we cooked everything, we served drinks, and we acted as waiters, and people didn't know that we were actual performance artists until we started doing really weird things. And one of the things that we did is that we served only side dishes, right? And we kind of kept the middle blank. We actually put rice in the middle, which was white. And then the meat, which is usually like the main course, was all raw in front of as a centerpiece. And I was really, really surprised that people actually sat down and ate. I really thought they were gonna like freak out and leave. And only one person left because she was pregnant and she just couldn't deal with it. So this was the dish. We also did a video together. One thing that's happening that I was gonna get back to is that by this time we have a couple of kids. My home continues to change. This is a bar that I built myself. I'm a serious drunk. Like if I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna drink it with style. I'm gonna build a bar, damn it. I'm not really a drunk. I started doing a lot of stuff in the house, like homemade, right? And again, like I just keep thinking that these things are informing what I do. Like everything I do can and is art because I say so, right? So I got really interested in homebrewing. So Alberto Aguilar had a show, which was in a house, and the house had a bar, and then he said, like, why don't we make a beer together, and we actually serve the beer together as part of, like, you know, the opening. And I'm like, sounds good, let's actually make a label together too. And then he comes, this is not cool. Then he comes, and then we start making the beer, and we realize, like, we could be filming this, so why don't we just film this? And in a very organic way, we came up with this piece called Latin Bar Moves, and all we're doing is getting ready to put together assemble the pieces to make the beer. This beer that we were making was called Dual Plains, and it was an American IPA aged with oak chips that were drenched in Venezuelan rum and tequila. He's Mexican, American. And then shredded coconut, which is something that both cultures kind of have in common. So again, we're dealing with the United States, Mexico, and Venezuela. So we're kind of putting together that mixture, like, so this is my Venezuelan rum, this is his tequila, but it's all very like ritualistic, and it was really interesting because we barely talked about it, and we didn't talk during the video. This is a mixer that then goes into the fermenter. And this was the label that we did together as a collaboration. I have continued to make beers and labels, and beer continues to be part of something that may or may not inform what I'm doing at that moment. I may actually make the 45 minutes in your face. All right. All the while, I'm still making, work about my house. I start to understand a little bit more why I'm making this work. This is silk screen and drawing, so this is a 3-layer of silk screen. This part over here is pencil. I'm interested in kind of fooling the eye a little bit, and like having people think that it's all silk screen or all drawing is important to me. Again, I'm kind of understanding a little bit more this whole like duality of directions. It's a detail. This is pencil. This is, again, silk screen and pencil. This is silk screen and pencil again. And it's always my house. It's always, I don't use any other houses. These are all 30 by 22. Always kind of leaving that empty space in between. And the empty space is very symbolic, and it's very personal, and it means something very different to different people. It's a space that you can fill up with whatever you want or just leave empty. And it's that limbo space that I was talking about before, right? I became really interested in foundations. The house next to my house got turned down, and I saw the foundation being built, and I really liked it. These became very large drawings. These are 58 by 42. Drawings, all pencil, and again, it was the foundation is empty, so it symbolizes potential, right? Like something being built, but at the same time, it seems like it could be abandoned. It's that limbo, that interdependency between something and nothing, right? Between empty and filled. I've always been very interested in that. I also like the fact that it's like the one thing about the house that you don't get to see. It's like the underwear of the house. But without it, you couldn't actually build the house. And to me, it also talks about the fact that this is about the structure of a house, the actual physical aspect of a home, but it's not really what makes it a home. What makes it a home is the stuff, is the people, the animal, the kids, right? Again, these are all the same size, 58 by 42, all pencil. They are horribly to make. They're very painful, very, very painful to make, especially in my studio, which you will see in a little bit. And there's a lot of emptiness in them. I want them to be very empty, and I want them to be very kind of, a little bit lonely, if you will. I actually built a little tiny foundation, which was also exhibited in a show that I had in the Franklin called Voids. And the Franklin is It's a house. It's a domestic gallery that's run by Evera Soto. So in the show, I showed this is a little thing. It's like a little deck. I showed the foundation, which is actually still there, and then a couple of the drawings, and you can kind of see the size of the drawings here. And I really like the interaction that people had with the little foundation. And it kind of proved my point that it could be empty and quiet, or it could be, fun or dangerous. And for this, I actually made a beer for the opening as well. That again, the label becomes part of the whole deal. Nothing Concrete was my last solo show before this one in Burt Green Fine Art in Chicago. It's a very small space, which I really like. I'm always very interested in different weird spaces. You can see, the sculpture that is in the show right now, along with the foundation drawings. There was a little room in which I made this other piece. It's a tower of cinder blocks and a pillow being kind of crushed in between. My last collaboration is with Nate Matthews, which is a photographer. Again, really interesting that conversation between artists and work, the actual work. My work became something different because of the proximity to his work, and his work became better. Became different because of the proximity of my work. Just a few more pictures behind the scenes. I always find it fun to see that. This is my studio. Talk about domesticity. My studio is in the basement of my house, and this is one of those panoramic pictures. So in one side of the house, one side of the studio is my studio, and one side of the basement is my studio. And the ceilings are really low, so I gotta kind of really draw, like looking down, which is really painful for my back, but it's the only studio I have. And what's funny is that my work is so clean, it's so clean, and then I look to the left and I see that, right? Which is really funny. And then all the sculptural work is done in my garage, which, as you can see, is a complete mess. And again, I just find it really interesting that you go to the show and it's like very, very clean. So the process is really dirty, but hopefully the final product is really clean. This is all the pieces that I did for this show. That's the palette. So it takes me to Pillow Talk, and I just want to just give a shout out to the people that helped me, which I had written down here, and it has erased. So Caleb, Megan, Danielle, Jimbo, John. I saw you too, but I don't know if you helped me. You with the glasses. So thank you very much. It was impossible to do it without you guys. I do want to point out that Caleb and Jimbo are working pretty hard here. But then if you look over here, you see, like, it just seems like they're like, yeah, what are you doing tonight? It doesn't seems like no help whatsoever. So anyway, this is a little bit of a process of doing the thing. And these are the pieces that are in the show, which I hope that you've already seen. And just to talk very, very briefly about them, there are just basically a continuation of the same ideas of domesticity. I've been very interested in working with soft and hard materials, and again, steel materials that deal with construction, and also materials that deal with like something that's really personal, like a pillow. In the case of like the cinder block palette, I wanted to cover something that's like, something that you find in Home Depot with something that's kind of sexy, which is the chiffon. So kind of making it a little bit more personal. It is called Pillow Talk, mostly because it's things that you cannot find in a bedroom. But I am still interested in that conversation, between these two pillows, for example, right? Or the two comforters, right? And again, there is something a little like like there's a piece of cement on it, like it's being crushed by the cement. But at the same time, I find it to be very beautiful, and I find it to be very soft, which it is as well. So that conversation, that duality, is really an interest and a preoccupation of mine. And that's it, folks. Those are my 2 kids, and yeah. All right. 49 minutes and 25 seconds. All right. Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Would you have time for a couple questions? Yeah.
If you guys still want to hear me talk, if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer. I pretty much answer every question before you actually. I do that on purpose. Yeah, I'll just put this one instead. Great. Let's. If there are no questions, we can have some non-alcoholic beverages and. Yeah, I'm used to this. All right. Thank you. Thanks. All right. Yeah. All right. Go.